Welcome back to the Inspiring Workplaces Summer Series 2024 in partnership with H&H. I'm Christine Jarvis from H&H, and it's a real joy to be involved in such a fantastic event. We've been here every day this week at the same time for daily inspiring keynotes to transform your organisation. Today is our final session of this year's series, but don't worry if you haven't been able to make every session live, as all the talks are made available on demand on the Inspiring Workplaces website. Please do join the conversation. Add your comments, questions for the speakers in the comments section below. So on to our next and final speaker of the day and the finale of our summer series. I'm very excited to introduce Anwen Bottois, the leadership success coach and founder at Purple Sky Consulting. Anwen is a chartered fellow of the CIPD and a level 7 executive and senior leader ILM qualified coach and mentor. Her mission is to inspire leaders to love leading by becoming more confident, more effective, and more inspirational. Because if they love what they do, they can build teams that are healthier, happier, more motivated, and higher performing. In terms of an inspiring workplace, who could ask for more than that? So in a moment, Anwen will be sharing with us the realities for leaders when they transition into bigger roles and the priority steps that organizations need to build into onboarding and promotion in order to accelerate these leaders to success. So welcome, Anwen.
Hi, what an intro. That was lovely. Thank you so much. That was really great. Yeah, I'm really, really delighted to be here and part of this series and hopefully closing it off with a really great session for everybody who's with us today. So I will get started when you're ready. Here we go. Fantastic. Thanks, Christine. So as Christine's mentioned, I'm Anwen. I'm going to just explain a little bit about myself that won't repeat, hopefully, too much what Christine shared. What I'm going to be talking to you about today is accelerating your leaders to success. And this is based around my 3 E's for enabling that to happen quickly. So what I want to talk about is transitions, so leadership transitions, and how we can really support leaders as they go through those points. And that's come from my own perspective of learning my own experience around transitioning between different leadership roles. So I'm excited to be sharing that with you today. So in terms of introduction, I'm just going to move on. Okay, sorry. As Christine said, I'm CIPD, and that's because I've had 15 to 20 years, when you add on the leadership part of it, in HR, predominantly as a generalist, but later on in my career, I was an associate director looking after the people strategy side of the business. And I had a team, and I ended up with quite a big team for where I had been previously. I loved that aspect of it. I loved the people leadership aspect of it. And it became a real source of something for me to kind of take into the world of work that I'm in now. And the reason I'm got my own business now and I'm freelance is my husband and I, during the pandemic, decided we wanted to travel. We wanted more flexibility in our life. So we sold our house and we went traveling. And we had 11 months living out a suitcase and visiting the world between 22 and 23. And that was great because it gave us a brilliant opportunity to see the world, but it also gave me loads of time to really reflect on where I wanted to take my business, but also kind of my own experience, my leadership experience. What did I learn from that experience so that I could really kind of harness that and make really good use of it? And what I discovered from that reflection point was, as I was coaching still people while we were traveling and I was engaging with different leaders, I was seeing really interesting themes come up about that transition people make between different roles. And I knew that was an area that I wanted to focus on because I'd found it challenging. And that was as somebody who had spent 15 years before that time helping, supporting, coaching, mentoring leaders as they took on leadership roles. But I then had to learn and to do that myself. So that is a little bit about where I got to with those reflections. It was getting to a point where I went, that transition was challenging. And as a result, I've identified some key foundations that I'm going to share with you today. And those are the foundations of my development program. I'm not going to go through the development program, so don't worry, it's not a pitch on that today. What I'm going to be sharing with you is the input into that, the foundations for it, and how you can take action on it, because it is something you can take action on for yourself. And at the end, I'll share how you can get hold of a DIY guide with some templates and some other support for you to do that for yourself as well. So let's look at this through the lens of a journey, a leadership career journey. We start on our own, learning our trade, developing our expertise, and we are pretty much on our own. This was me initially as a HR assistant leaving university, learning the ropes, understanding kind of the world of work and understanding the world of HR a little bit and what that meant in different environments and different sectors. And as I just developed, my career grew and I moved into a business partnering role. So I ended up getting the keys to the car because I was taking on a lot more responsibility. I was now partnering for big cohorts of colleagues and working with multiple leadership teams. I had a lot more responsibility now. And as I transitioned into a different business partnering role, I then ended up with a team. I hadn't intended on having a team. I hadn't intended on that being part of my path at that point, but it was the same role. So I was still driving that car, but I now had people on board in that car. I was taking on extra responsibility. There was no additional input or support for my leadership capability or effectiveness as I moved into that. Now, obviously, as an HR person, I knew quite a lot about good people management and leadership development and all those types of things. But yeah, it's not the same as doing it for yourself. And goodness me, did I know that when I took on the bus. So I actively wanted to step up and take on a departmental role. And that meant I now had a team of 20 with 4 direct reports. I very much was driving a bus that I had never driven before and was not prepared for and didn't really realize that that's what I was actually going to end up doing. It was such a shift. So yes, I'd had plenty of experience driving that car, but driving the bus was very different. Now, what sometimes people will do, they will go from that departmental role up into an organizational leadership role. And I've chosen the articulated truck here, but hey, choose an airplane, the big boat, whatever you want to do in terms of your mode of transport. But recognizing that when somebody moves from a departmental leadership role to leading the organization itself, that is incredibly different. Yes, there's a leadership aspect to it. Yes, you are in that leadership space like you are with the bus. But again, you are on a different scale. It is a different situation altogether. So if we think about that and we think about these modes of transport, quite often you're not allowed to drive a bus or the articulated lorry or anything like that without some level of training, some level of license to do it legally. Now, in no way am I saying we should be doing that with leaders, though, to be honest. There is a school of thought of having qualifications and licenses in place for people moving into leadership roles. But it's more taking that point of stepping back and reflecting on the fact that quite frequently organizations do this all the time. They will hand people the keys to the bus or the articulated lorry or the car without any training, any supervision, any support to help them make that transition. And even when they do, sometimes it's just not enough. Getting to the point of passing your tests is great, but we all know that the learning really happens after we've passed our test. And that's where we need to pay a lot more attention to how leaders are transitioning between those different roles. So let me share a little bit more about my experience and what I was experiencing when I moved from my car of just having a few people in my team to the bus where I had 20 people overall that I was responsible for with 4 direct reports. I'd never done this before. This was new. I was managing different types of stakeholders. I was managing a budget. I now had to deal with strategy and articulating strategy and getting people on board with things that didn't report directly to me. That was just something I'd never done before. And the realization once I started doing this of, oh my goodness, that challenge that all those other leaders I've worked with have experienced of going to move into a different role. And it's a very different job. And as an individual, you don't want people to doubt you as you move into those roles. that takes a lot. And Jane was talking about the culture and environment that you want to create where people are able to stick their hand up and say, help. That can be very challenging to start with. If you're new into the organization, or if you've been promoted, I'd been promoted into that role, I didn't want to let people down. I didn't want to have people doubt my abilities or my desire to do the job well. So the likelihood that I'm going to stick my hand up and say, I'm really struggling, or I've never done this before, now that you've trusted me with this big job, that's quite a place of vulnerability. And we need to create an environment where leaders really are able to kind of have that safe space to talk about the things that they might be struggling with. Because quite honestly, the impacts that those people have in those kind of mid to senior level leader roles, and more broadly and higher up as well, is huge. You're not just impacting on the work that people are doing, you're impacting on the lives of those people. We often are taking home with us how we feel about our job or what's going on about our job. And that is something that me as a leader, I was impacting, and how my capability showed up, how my confidence, my behaviors, all of those things had a huge impact on my team. So I needed to know where I would turn. And I was lucky. I had a really great boss who was incredibly supportive, and I had a great colleague who also was very supportive, and we stepped up at a similar time. But again, where do you turn to really when you maybe are lacking in confidence, or you're not really sure what to do, or you just haven't got the time and the bandwidth to figure that out for yourself? I very much felt like I would get there. I wanted it. I wanted to do a brilliant job. I wanted to do a great job for my team. I knew I would get there. But what is the time scale that is going to take to enable somebody to get there with confidence and really effective? And I know that there was an impact on my well-being. And I know I wasn't at top performance immediately. It's not possible to do that. We need to create the space to enable people to move through that safely. 9 months in, I got access to a leadership development program, and that really helped shift me. That really gave me the opportunity to reflect and think about where I was. And that was a really key part of my reflections when I thought about the leadership role and the work that I wanted to be doing. It was brilliant. I'd have loved it a lot earlier. It would have been much helpful a lot earlier if I was able to kind of start thinking about what I needed and start having access to the skill development, the behavior and mindset development I needed, and the support to help me shift and help me move. So that's my experience, but it's very familiar to some of the stories I will hear from other leaders that I've worked with. And it's not unusual that I will speak to leaders and ask them about the expectations that the business has of them and in their role, and they aren't able to articulate that clearly. So let's have a think about why that matters. Well, it matters because if leaders aren't performing, if they're struggling with their transition into their new role, it has a huge impact on the performance of the team and therefore the business. And this research from Gartner is really interesting. I'm happy to kind of get the links for all of these and make sure you've got access to those. Up to 49% are underperforming when people have moved into leadership roles for up to 18 months. That's huge. That's massive. And if you think about that next bit of information there, which is around the CEB global information, which is when a leader is struggling with their transition into a new role, that on average has an impact of 15% on the performance of the team. So yes, that's an average, so it could be less, but it also could be higher. And what is the financial costs, emotional costs of that happening within your organization? And that's a large number of people being impacted. We're seeing a lot of shift and change in leadership teams. There's a lot of movement and a lot of churn in terms of leadership roles. So if you think about it, on average, taking that amount of time for people to move and to get into a place of confidence and performance, that is definitely something to take note of. And something from my own research, from talking to leaders and people that were going through these types of transitions, I asked them about the types of conversations the organizations they'd moved into or were promoted within had with them around their leadership responsibilities in this bigger role, in this new role that they were in. And only 20% of them had had a specific conversation about the leadership requirements of that organisation for them in this new role. And if you think about that shift of roles going on, and you haven't had that opportunity to really think about actually what's now needed of me, how are you going to perform? How are you going to get into a place of really understanding what's required of you? So here are the 3 E's. So for me, this is, if you can pay attention to these 3, you will really help to accelerate your leaders to success when they transition into bigger roles. We want to get them to a place of confidence and effectiveness quickly. And if you look at these 3 lenses of considering how you support those leaders in those transitions, it will really make a difference to them, but also to your organisation. So let's have a little look at these in a little bit more detail. So if we look at engage, this is about connecting them to that new or bigger role. What is it you need from them? What is the leadership strategy of the organisation? What are you trying to achieve? And where are they? Who are they as leaders at the moment? Have they done any leadership before? If they have, what's different about this role? Is it much bigger? Are they changing? You know, what's going on? What is it that you need from them? What is going on from them? And what shift is it that they need to make? So what are potentially going to be the gaps? What are the hurdles they need to overcome? Where is it they need to pay attention in terms of their behaviours, their skills, their mindsets in this new leadership role, so that it's much easier for them to have clarity around what they need to focus on in terms of that leadership activity and leadership development. And a core part of this engagement into this new role is them knowing that you're committed to their success. So what we see a lot of, as we said, 20% of people had had a conversation about the leadership aspect of things. People are left to fend for themselves. Here you go. Here's the new role. Congratulations. You told us you could do it. Off you go. And that's great to a certain extent. You know, that's been happening for thousands and thousands of years. But what we know from the research is where people are struggling in leadership roles, it has an impact. If we think about the talk from Deborah Corey earlier this week, earlier in the series, when we have a bad boss, when we have a leader that doesn't work for us in the right way, that has an impact. But that is also true for the leaders, because those leaders are employees too. They are colleagues within the business. And what we need to do is set them up for success. So we need to help them to know that we understand the shift they need to make, and we're going to support them in that shift. And that's where we move into enable. So what we need to do is give them access to the skills development, the behavior development, whether it's training, whether it's mentoring, whether it's coaching, whatever that might look like, to help them make the shift that has been identified so that they really can get to grips with this new role quickly. That is a really important part of that. And that skill development, feeling like you're more effective, feeling like you're doing the things you should be, that's so important to building your confidence as a leader. And when you're more confident, it means you're spending less time worrying about whether you're doing the right thing, because you know you're doing the right thing. And that's where we need to have them spending more time on the job rather than figuring the job out. So after enable, we're looking at empower, building that confidence, building on that confidence that is growing, so that actually they feel real ownership about that role. As a HR professional, like, one of the things that I get most frustrated about would be when leaders who are paid to be leaders and paid to deliver on that work just were not, hands back, not wanting to get involved in it, or were really struggling with it. And the reality is there was a lack of confidence, there was a lack of connectivity to that role and their responsibility within that role. So by building that clarity around what you need from them, by building their skills, behaviors, and mindsets in their leadership role, you are connecting them to that leadership role. They can then take ownership and kind of build on that. And hopefully, because they have built those skills, those mindsets, those behaviors, hopefully they're enjoying it as well. You know, we want people to enjoy these leadership roles. We don't want that part of it to be a chore. It should be a really enjoyable part of the role. And that's what we should be encouraging our leaders and empowering them in that way. And We can look at this through lots of ways, from an individual basis, but also creating a connection to the community, the leadership community. How can they work together, and how through that engagement, that enablement, that empowerment of them as a leader, so that they are more confident and effective, that they are really then becoming brilliant role models within your organization for new leaders coming into the business or being promoted. And that sets a great tone for your organization overall and future talent, because we all know that having brilliant role models is so important to the organization. So what I want to do next for you is talk you through how you can kind of take action on some of this stuff yourselves. How, as an organization, you can kind of implement those 3 E's to really help leaders as they make those transitions. Because leaving it until they are 9 months in, although helpful at that point, actually starting at the beginning will help accelerate the success and help them get to a point of confidence and effectiveness more quickly. So first up, you want to be connecting them to your leadership strategy. Help them understand what it is you need from leaders and what that means for them. So understanding what kind of leader they want to be, understanding your organization, understanding the role that they are now in, and looking that all together. And then that's the third point, helping them then be clear on the shifts that they need to make. Getting some clarity around, this is where I was, sorry, that's very good English. So this is where I need to be. This is where I'm going, so that we can understand that actually there is movement to be made and understanding what that looks like. And from understanding that shift, you can then pay attention to, so what's the development and support they need to help them make that shift, to close that gap, to really enable them to make the shift in terms of confidence and effectiveness. And once you've identified those, I would say get clear on the priorities. There might be a long list. It depends how big a shift this is for this individual. But what we're prioritizing here is building confidence and building effectiveness. So look at what is going to make the biggest impact first. Help them in those places so that they can start building on that confidence by focusing on areas that really will help them shift quickly. Give them access to what they need to do that gap closing. So as I mentioned before, it might be that you have brilliant resources internally that can fill that gap and help them build those skills, behaviors, and mindsets. It might be you need to work with an external provider. Coaching, mentoring, books, YouTube, LinkedIn, resources, whatever that looks like, to help them make that shift, start making that shift, and that they feel supported as they start practicing that. Because the leadership development doesn't happen in the training room. Yes, you are sharing knowledge, you're getting them to practice expertise and ideas, absolutely. But the reality of the leadership development happens outside of the training room. So they need to understand where they're going to get that support once they start practicing. And keep it alive. Keep looking at the plan that you've put together, the priorities that you've worked with on them. And that's, keep reviewing that. You know, what's going well? Where are they making progress? What do we need to build on? And reflect on that impact. So where have they gone from? Where are they up to now? How have they closed that gap? How have they made that shift? What have they learned about themselves during that time? And how do you keep building on that? So those are some of the key areas that you can implement for yourselves. And I can help you in a couple of ways with that as well. So what you'll be able to do, if you head over to my LinkedIn profile, there's a link at the top of my profile, which is about getting the DIY guides, free DIY guides to prepare for success. So in that, you will get those steps to go through to really accelerate your leaders to success. And there's some templates and some other support tools in there to help you to do that for yourselves. I've recently been testing my Boost Connects program, which is based on the 3 E's. So that's kind of servicing all 3 E's. And this is relaunching in September. So if you don't want to do this for yourselves and you want somebody who can expertly support your leaders through leadership transitions, then please feel free to get in touch. It's a combination of one-to-one learning in terms of on-demand courses that are bite-sized for leadership topics. There's coaching and mentoring, in-person development days, monthly online live sessions, and a community to go with that. So we can really support that leader in making that transition. And there's lots of other lovely free resources you can access on my website as well in other areas. So feel free to go and visit the Purpose Guide Thinking for Leaders Hub and help yourself to that. So Christine, that's me in terms of outlining how leaders can be successfully transitioned. Have we had any questions, or is there anything you want to pick up on?
I haven't seen any questions or comments come through. We still have time if anybody wants to post one. I just wanted to say, wow, there's so much in there, absolutely fascinating, and it's just so clear that this is a real passion for you, isn't it? It's something that really means something to you. I particularly love the 3 E's: engage, enable, empower. So logical, so sensible and human. It makes me wonder, why is this not the norm?
Yeah, I'm glad that you reflect on it in that way. Sometimes I'm looking at it going, is this just too much like common sense? And
it is, but it's not the norm, is it? So what's missing? What do you think is the blocker there?
Do you know what? It's really interesting, isn't it? Because all that reflection that I did in terms of kind of getting to the point of creating the program was looking back like, oh my goodness, I did this to people for years of just going, yeah, well done, you got promoted, congratulations. And although we would do an element of supporting them and getting them through that, there's a reality check around the vulnerability of somebody moving into a much bigger job when they've not done it before. And that, I think, was such a big reality check of we've gone through an interview process, we've told somebody we can do the job, so we should just be able to do the job, shouldn't we? And that's fine if it's somebody who's got 10, 15 years of operating at that level. But when we're promoting people, or when we're seeing something in somebody and we want to help them move on in their career, the reality is if they've not done that job before, it's a very different job.
Yeah, the statistics you shared also, some of those were a little bit frightening. The idea of an accidental manager who's then left to continue in that accidental role. The 49% of people are underperforming for up to 18 months. It seems that the confidence that you then talk about instilling in managers and leaders starts right at the beginning. And it seems it takes courage to say, hey, as you say, you've been entrusted with this new role, to then say, hey, I need support. Absolutely. What advice would you offer to a new manager, or maybe a newly promoted leader who isn't getting that support and doesn't know how to ask for it?
That's a great question. And I think if I reflect on my own experience, I looked for my own sources of input. So there were great books that I looked at and engaged with that really helped me to kind of connect with leading and a different type of leading I needed to do. This wasn't task now. This was about culture. This was about environment. This was about communication. It was very different. So for me, books, YouTube, all those types of places are your friends to go and get inspired. You have to, for me, there's no blueprint to this. And that's why when I put the on-demand training together, it's all bite-sized. It's little bits of something, because as an individual, you have to find your way with it. You have to be you when you lead. So we need to kind of give people inspiration, and then we need to give them support to practice it and find their way of doing it.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So that makes me also ask, in your own experience, what was the biggest shift for you when you moved into a completely new role?
So other than the fact it was all quite terrifying, and it was like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of eyes looking at me in this meeting now. I'm kind of doing my intro hello to people. So that was quite terrifying. I was quite lucky in a way. When I got promoted, I wasn't promoted to lead teams that I was part of previously. And I wasn't necessarily a subject matter expert in those areas either. So what was interesting for me is recognizing the need to stay out of those spaces and to really focus on the leadership aspect. So I think the biggest learning point for me was recognizing that my role was different now. This wasn't about the task. It was about enabling the team to do the task really well and to deliver on what we needed to deliver. So I think the mindset piece was absolutely the biggest learning point. Yeah.
Fantastic. It comes down to that mindset, doesn't it? And being brave and being human. Thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating talk. Thanks very much, Anwen.
Loved it. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for joining us today for the final day of the Summer Series 2024. You can join the Inspiring Workplaces Inspire Hub Forum. You'll find the link to join on the Inspiring Workplaces website, and keep these important conversations going. Let's keep talking and sharing and making workplaces the best they possibly can be. We've been thrilled to have you with us this summer and hope to catch you again next time. Don't forget to check out the Inspiring Workplaces website for more events coming up. But for now, it's farewell from me. Bye-bye.